The makers of this culture often show us how their system works through movies, because you must mock the victim, and there's no better movie put out on the condition of the modern male than American Beauty, the movie. Well worth seeing, and you'll see how the daughter grows up emulating the mother's response to the father, which is total disgust and disdain, and the daughter watches the mother almost salivating over very successful men that she works with, or the men around her. The daughter then looks for someone who is powerful, in charge, in control, and very often it's one of the criminal mindset. This is well understood. The political correctness of today does not change human nature. Nature can be sublimated, but it cannot be destroyed simply through indoctrinations. It shifts around in the subconscious and will show itself in other ways. What is interesting too, is the role model of the father has come down again primarily through media and through entertainment, which we emulate. Monkey see, monkey do. That's what has always been known since before the days of Plato. Women still need the powerful male. That's why they can get lost in fantasy and carried away through movies and drama, and that's why Harlequin romance books, which are really a form of written porn, today's variety anyway, are the most widely read books and recirculated books in second-hand stores, next to the Bible for consumption. There's a tremendous need there because you cannot get rid of drives. You can sublimate them according to cultural custom, even when the cultural custom is being altered and updated. As the father comes down on the scale of things with power, girls at schools often fall headlong over the teacher figure who has authority, and who is given authority over them, and they have these crushes. This headlong dive into almost anonymity, quiet, silent anonymity of the male has been helped through inoculations, which has definitely affected the hormonal output of the male. This is studied every year. The sperm count is disclosed every year by the United Nations. The reason for the United Nations being so interested in this phenomena is because they have a Department of Population Control, and we've all been tampered with, male and female, with our hormones and through inoculations and xenoestrogens as well added to the water and so on, through plastic pipes, plastic bottles, which were made popular for that reason. We've been heavily scientifically tampered with, and this was done because the male natural response is to protect the tribe and protect the family. In the changes which are coming up, you must destroy that bond. You must destroy any power the male has in society and replace it with TV, fake ones, hyper-politicians who always seem to know what they want even if it's mass slaughter. It's a symbol of a man with power. Between ages and the mysteries always have categories of ages where they use the zodiacal dominance of a particular member of the zodiac to predominate for the 2,500 years, and Aquarius is their utopia. Not the utopia for the people, although all the New Agers have been taught that it is. Somehow they'll all become one, and it will be the brain chip. They'll all be one all right, but they won't be individuals anymore. This is the other side of totalitarianism and tyranny. People can submit like slaves rather than face the world with the added burden of being an individual in a changing world. In the mysteries, which match up perfectly with fascism and communism, you'll find that the sun and the moon are other emblems of the same two things. You'll also find that the scythe of Saturn, Cronus in the Greek, is called the scythe wielder that cuts the link or the chain between two ages, and during this transitory period he is called the master of misrule or the lord of misrule. It's when the old culture seems to be falling apart, and it does because it's made to fall apart as role reversal, cultural reversal. Things which were taught as truth for thousands of years are suddenly reversed or exposed, and there's a period of chaos of misrule. It's a time when people who are in the know and the understanding can rise to the top if they're in the right families and taught the mysteries. For most people it's chaos. They have nothing to hold on to. It's like ships without anchors. They're just tossed around on the waves. Hence the massive indoctrination through magazines and television with specialists supposedly in psychology to tell you what to think, what to do, how to behave. In reality, you're being used. It's motivational behavior modification that you're submitting yourself to, and it's not for your own good. It's for those who rule you. Along with all the New Age bookshelves, you'll see all the motivational techniques in the same books of what you can be. You're being altered. Your thoughts are being altered. Your motivations are being guided by someone else, and you'll find that you are all going a path already laid out for you, promising you one end, but you don't see the end of it, and you won't even when you hit it. This is masterful control. It was many, many centuries in the making, and you can see the beginnings of this sudden outburst of the sciences. In the 1500s, in the court of Queen Elizabeth I of England, where it was the first openly Rosicrucian court in history, everyone around Queen Elizabeth I, all the famous players you'll find mentioned in her era, were all members of the same Rosicrucian lodge in London. The outburst of the sciences is what is so interesting with John Dee and Francis Bacon and many others, because they knew they had 500 years to use sciences, make the public work, and create an industrial era, and then all of the things that would come from that industrial era, such as bigger and greater wars to dominate the whole planet and create a world empire, and always fooling the people who fought those wars. Always fooling them with a different reason, a different outcome, such as the First World War, the war they said through, and it was H.G. Wells, the propagandist for the British government, who coined the term, the war to end all wars. What a joke that was! It's the last vestige of a tribal system. In a well-bonded family they can be very formidable and will stand up for each other against all odds. In this system, the New World Order, where it's not just family planning on a small scale, it's global planning on a similar type of agenda scale that's going to be implemented. You can have no families as we have known them, and that's why every family around is basically today dysfunctional. Dysfunctional because it's been made that way as the culture creators and the manipulators have altered it. The biggest and most frequently spoken about problem in therapy and counseling for couples today is when the man says that he's not allowed by his wife to be a man. That means, you see, she's learned from her mother, who was the dominant one in the family and with an ineffectual father. She's learned to emulate the mother, and even if she were to meet someone who she could respect, if she would allow herself to, she can't take it. She emulates the mother. She's grown up and copied it. This is a form of imprinting which the big boys understand perfectly well, and this talk is not meant to upset people. The truth cannot upset mature minds who have made the same observations themselves, who are honest with themselves. In an indoctrinated culture, it's difficult for the average person to be honest with themselves. They're full of stereotyped responses, conditioned reflexes, which are marketed into their heads by popular media and popular culture from 1,000 different areas and places. The elite who gave us marriage in the first place, as I've said many times before, never followed any idea or notion of romantic love between themselves. In fact, the high priesthoods which really ran Babylon were more interested in men themselves being men, as it's always been the same in fact in all high priesthoods in every culture. Women are disliked and sometimes hated by them as almost irrelevant, but it's more than just that. It's to do with again the sadomasochistic streak which they have themselves going up through an order of deviancy, which they then promote on general culture at the right time. The reason they hate women is because, and every study has shown this up to date and reproved it, and all sociologists know this, women are the easier ones to manipulate into trying or going along with something new. The culture creationists love this because they can then introduce fads and modes of thinking which will alter the culture. Women who have their own needs, when the needs are understood, they can be so easily manipulated. When you look just at the women of the early 1900s, the great-grandmothers and grandmothers of the girls who suddenly were given the miniskirt in the 60s, and compare the two, they're both women, and yet one would never have dared to put on something which just barely covered the body. It isn't that the grandmother or great-grandmother would never have done that. It's just that through her culture and her period she was indoctrinated not to do that. Whereas the granddaughter was not only encouraged, it was made the social norm and not to stand out to be accepted by the peer group, another facet of understanding which the big boys have. A natural trait could be exploited because young people are run by hormones and attraction and they want to be looked at and admired and so on. This is reality. The male and the female is set at war with each other on purpose. A war which was covered and subdued during the period where marriage was encouraged in the Middle Ages and onwards to work for the system. Now the reversal, like Plato said, you can reverse the culture and those that go through the changes are the last ones to notice. That should be quite amazing to a thinking person, but it's true. There's nothing on television that's real. There's nothing that is spontaneous on television. Everything down, and I've talked to many producers in the past, everything down to even a third-rate play for your main television station, like CBC in Canada. Every part of the set, including the type of flower in a little glass vase and the color and the positioning, is discussed by panels of people, everything for its psychological impact. There isn't a phrase which comes out spontaneously out of the person's head. The newscasters read dummy boards, but they look at you with authority. In a world where we find we're floating helplessly individually, we create that authority, and that is again the sadomasochistic tendency. Those who are pushed down in society crave the power of those who do the pushing. The abused person can become the abuser so easily. The divisions of people are almost perfect now. It's the rare individual that has maturity that can overcome their conditioning. It's the rare couple who can go through a lifetime together with respect for each other, unaffected, and certainly not acting out all of the ways you're supposed to behave according to television, which of course would bring on the chaos. It's the rare individual who understands that in this day and age, most people are simply full of their conditioned responses and reflexes. They're unanchored in a rough sea, and that's all intentional. That's why the booming industry in psychology, psychiatry, therapy, groups of all kinds, cults, and yet they're all being led on the same path, because you are going to find the same teachings today throughout therapy as you will in the New Age, because everything comes from the same capstone in culture creation. Cause the problems, guide them into the solutions. These are ancient sciences at work. The rule books, as I say, are in all holy books. They are the holy books, for those who understand them, and if we take passages in the Old Testament, you'll see older echoes of the New. In Revelations, the revealing of the system, they say that man would be turned against woman, woman against her husband, children against their parents, and we tend to think, how could that be? How could any power cause that to happen? And the answer is, easily, because they understood the sciences thousands of years ago just as well as they do today. The mainstream characters they let loose on the public, like Freud and others, were giving you kindergarten reality, which still astounded many people at the time, but they only give you enough to alter the culture towards the agenda. They don't give you all of the sciences which they have. You never share power if you want to control others. When we look at the tremendous amount, never mind the propaganda given to the homosexual movement and lesbian movement, and as I say, there's nothing in social movements that isn't approved and created from the top down at the right time. If it didn't suit the purpose, it wouldn't happen. There'd be no funding. Even if there was a demonstration, you would never hear about it on the news, but women have been emulating dominant mothers, and since survival instincts will look for a partner with dominance, many of the women look towards other females. Many of the males see the mother as dominant and the father is absent, today gone, divorced, kicked out, whatever, and the mother is dominant, so they emulate the mother. These were all known responses to the induced situations. As I say, those who created marriage for a purpose and marriage for life have reversed all the structures that kept it in place for the New Age, and I'm simply the messenger on this topic. When the elite had their arranged marriages, it was for progeny only. They'd appear on the balcony, the king and queen, the fairy tale, and the people would emulate what they saw. Aren't they a loving couple? But in reality, they didn't have to even like each other. Their houses and castles were so big they could live in either end and never see other except for the balcony appearances, if need be, and the male was free to do what he wanted to do, and so was the woman, and they did. In the 20th century, really, that's when they gave us romantic love and encouraged it big time to keep it going, to keep the marriage system going for World War I and II, and then start to dismantle it after the United Nations was officially in power. The acceptance of another person for life takes tremendous maturity and self-understanding. Few people have the ability to critically look at themselves and decipher themselves. We're very good at picking apart other people, but because of ego we tend to ignore ourselves. The bonding process of two people takes time and maturity and trials and tribulations, but most importantly it takes understanding of each individual by the individual concerned. The media constantly gives us a barrage of fiction and drama with even the ideal partner, always fictionalized to the extreme with the chiseled features and the perfect body. They don't show you them with their personal trainers, the actors and actresses, and all the stuff they have to go through to keep their weight down and all the rest of it, and their liposuction and their jaw implants and cheek implants for the men and all the other implants for the woman, to give you this perfect picture of the perfect male or female. This is to make Joe Average and Jill Average unhappy with the one they have in life. It's intentional, and as I say, it's a rare person of either gender who understands this and accepts the one they're with as being basically human and natural. We chase after, and we're taught to chase after by the media and entertainment media, all of the fantasies which always lead to ruin because they are fantasy. There is no self-satisfaction to follow fantasy. It's the will of the wisp, such stuff are dreams made of, yet everyone's encouraged to chase after the dreams. Who gives us the dreams? Very few people understand that they simply are the dreamers, but who gives them the dreams? For what purpose? And the same media that gives you the dreams loves to point out how dysfunctional society has become. Just look at it. It's in chaos, as they give you more and more porn for entertainment, and porn now isn't even porn. It's deviant. It's got to be more and more deviant, you see. Like any addiction, you have get more and more of it and wilder stuff to get the high. This is intentional, and then out come the governments with all of its agencies. They breed faster than anyone I know. Governments are always having offspring of new departments to deal with the new parts of the chaos always, and this again is what Carl Jung envisaged in his last book. It wasn't just an iron curtain across the world of communism versus fascism. It was a slowly expanding iron curtain across the whole planet of dictatorial bureaucracies until there was no freedom left for the individual. He was well aware that you can dissect society into the individual and those that we would say are the mass. I'm not pushing some covered religion, as you might be surprised others are doing, and that's another story. I am just telling you of the various things that I know to do with the system, to do with why you feel so alienated, those who think and those who aren't even certain of why they feel that way. I'm explaining it to you, and this series of talks has been to do with how everything is controlled, gender, the generations, the so-called races, the colors, and you should think about that in itself because it is no coincidence it's called the human race. A race is something you start and try to win. What do they mean by that? We know that those at the top put lists out through or by their main economists in the 1700s onwards to do with those who would be useful in a future upcoming society based on economics and efficiency, and those who would be eliminated. Nothing happens in the system by chance. There are no sudden transmutations, spontaneous, of diseases. Diseases and the transmutation of a virus or a bacterium is a fine and old science by now. We live, as I say, in a world of disinformation. We have been trained to listen to no one except the experts, and this is something that I should really touch on now because we have a tribal craving for the leader.